In the spring of 1915, over 2,000 prospective workers and merchants assembled at the mouth of Ship Creek, and more were arriving every day. Shore access was difficult. Steamships anchored in Cook Inlet sent out small launches that brought passengers to shore on Ship Creek Flats. It was a muddy mess. Horse and foot traffic slogged their way through mud, over corduroy log paths, and the few hastily laid out boardwalks. A tent city quickly sprang up and was filled with a ragtag collection of tents and temporary wooden buildings. The conditions were rugged and unsanitary. Harry and Katsuyo Kimura arrived in Tent City from Seattle and took over a hand laundry. There was no running water, and the clothes that were brought to them to be cleaned were full of lice. Years later, the Kimura family went on to build Snow White Laundry and Cleaners and the very popular restaurant Nico Garden, just to name a couple. Back in 1915, the AEC, the Alaska Engineering Commission, ordered that by mid-August all tents had to be moved off of Ship Creek Flats and relocated up onto what is now known as Government Hill. What caused this rush? It wasn't gold. From May through June of 1914, 11 survey crews were sent from Seattle to Alaska. The purpose of these 11 survey crews was to determine possible routes for a proposed Alaska Railroad. In 1915, needing coal for the Pacific Fleet, the federal government decided to access the coal fields of the Matanuska Valley in Alaska. President Woodrow Wilson made the decision that the Alaska Railroad would run from Seward to Fairbanks. The route would take the railroad past the coal deposits of the Matanuska Valley and would end in Fairbanks. Then, in 1915, the United States Congress authorized construction for the only federally owned railroad in the history of the U.S. Construction headquarters would be established at the mouth of Ship Creek at Cook Inlet, and because Cook Inlet could be dredged to accommodate larger ships, it was a protected boat anchorage. The area was known as the Alaska Railroad Midpoint. The goal was to lay 470 miles of railroad tracks. It was like a gold rush without the gold. When it was announced that the AEC, Alaska Engineering Commission, was going to hire workers, thousands of people began arriving at Ship Creek Flats. Some were looking for jobs, some for lucrative business opportunities. Almost overnight, a rugged tent city sprang up among the tree stumps, and the work began. Who drove the first spike? Well, a lady named Martha White, who was born in a cabin just off Cook Inlet, was selected to drive the first railroad spike. A town was beginning, so lots were then laid out for a 240-acre town site under the supervision of Andrew Christensen of the General Land Office. Located in Elderberry Park at 420 M Street in Anchorage is a home that was built in 1915 by Oscar Anderson. Aside from a few log cabins, it was the first wood home built in Anchorage. His home still stands today as an Anchorage tourist site. Oscar Anderson claimed to be the 18th person to set foot on what is now Anchorage. He lived in his house until his passing in 1974. Now that they had a town, how did they decide on its name? Mary, do you know?
That's a great question, Mike. An election was held on August 9, 1915, to decide on an official name for the town that was springing up before their eyes. Names to consider included Alaska City, Gateway, Homestead, Anchorage, Lane, named after Secretary of the Interior Franklin D. Lane, Matanuska, Ship Creek, Terminal, Wynne, Alaska. There were 538 votes cast. The winner was Alaska City with 146 votes. Lane came in second with 129 votes. Third choice was Anchorage with 101 votes. Then Governor J.F.A. strongly wanted Matanuska. The Alaska Engineering Commission wanted the name Ship Creek. Then the United States Post Office got involved. Yes, the U.S. Post Office gave the town the name Anchorage. They appointed Royden Chase as the first postmaster, and all mail was then sent to Anchorage, Alaska. The new name was quickly added to maps and news stories covering the building of the railroad and the town. And that's how Anchorage got its name.
Now, thank you for that, Mary. So at this point, so much was happening that a newspaper actually came and set up shop in town. From its ragged tent office, the first issue of the Cook Inlet Pioneer and Knik News was issued as Volume 1, Number 1, as a weekly newspaper on June 5th, 1915. Now, here's a side note. Knik was once the largest settlement on Cook Inlet. Goods were shipped from Knik to interior Alaska, but when the Alaska Railroad bypassed Knik in favor of Ship Creek, and when the railroad reached Wasilla, Knik lost its place as a shipping point. As a result, most of Knik was abandoned, and many of the buildings were moved to other communities. Now, in October of 1915, the name of that newspaper we were just talking about in Tent City, Anchorage, was changed to the Cook Inlet Pioneer, and it became Anchorage's first daily newspaper. It would later become the Anchorage Daily News. From a rugged tent city to modern Anchorage, Alaska. Happily, the town of Anchorage still has a few reminders of its early days. The Windler Building in downtown Anchorage was one of the first grocery stores in Anchorage, and it later was home for Club 25. The Oscar Anderson House is still standing, as is the home of the first mayor of Anchorage, Leopold David. Now, Anchorage is the largest city in Alaska, but not long ago, it was a ragged tent city carved out of Alaska's wilderness on the shores of Cook Inlet. Now, Mary, we've heard from some of our North Stars, and they sent us some comments about the Lake Iliamna monster. Ben sent us this comment. I used to sit in the right seat of my dad's plane looking down over the float, hoping to catch a glimpse of Illy. Well, and Jim is interested in the $100,000 reward. Now that is a very interesting story about the Lake Iliamna monster. Thank you for the story. I'm surprised that no one has claimed the $100,000 reward. Well, Jim, I guess you can hop on a plane and go claim it yourself. This is Mike and Mary. Thank you for joining us for another great edition of the Anchorage Memories VIP Club and podcast. We'll see you next time.